G'day, welcome to Scrounger's Workshop. I've been wanting to have a crack at bluing with hot salts for a while, and I thought these old cable cutters I recently picked up would be the perfect candidate. So I'll get them apart and clean up the jaws, and then I'll explain more about the hot salts bluing. Here's all the parts I'm going to be bluing. I've cleaned up the jaws on the wire wheel, but you can see there's a little bit of damage to them still, and all the other minor parts have been sandblasted. So I'll get these jaws surfaced and get them back into good condition. Then we can get on with the bluing process. By the way, you're looking at these through a magnifying lens, so sorry about the reflections in there. As you can see, they're a bit pitted, need a little bit of work. I've got the surface grinder warming up here while I spark off. This machine was made in 1943, so it takes a few minutes to warm up. It's a brown and sharp, beautiful machine. While I'm cleaning the jaws up, I'll explain the hot salts method of bluing. You get a couple of chemicals and you mix those in water and you bring the whole lot to the boil, and then you drop your parts to be blued into the mixture for about 35 minutes. To work out the correct ratio of water to chemicals, it's not done by weight, it's done by temperature. When you've got the correct amount of dilution of the chemicals in the water, the boiling point will rise to 135 degrees. At that point, you know you've got your mixtures right and you can dunk your parts. I'd always thought hot bluing was heating the parts up nice and hot and dunking them in oil. But that can be a bit of hit and miss, especially on hardened parts and tempered parts. If you get them too hot, you'll ruin the temper. And that's where I came across this process. It seems to be particularly favoured by knife makers because you're only getting to 135 degrees, so you're not going to ruin any of the heat treatment in the blades, and they get a very nice finish. So I thought I'd give it a try. While I'm grinding here, each pass I'm dropping the wheel about 1 thou, and I think I went about 10 thou on both sides, 20 thou all up. You wouldn't really notice it to look at it, but it certainly cleaned up the jaws properly. Here you can see the setup. All the automatic adjustment mechanisms have been removed. It was hydraulic and it gave the previous owner a lot of trouble. So he removed the lot and it's all done manually. And I did consider for a while trying to locate all the parts and re-establish the automatic mechanisms, but I don't use it enough. And when I am using it, I find it very therapeutic. It's kind of mindfulness. So I don't really mind doing it manually at all. Here's the jaws fresh off the grinder, and while you can see that pattern in them, I can assure you that is glass smooth, and there's still a very small nick in the blade, but nothing that's going to affect how they work properly. Again, you're under a magnifying glass here. So now we're ready to get hot bluing. I'll wire all these parts together. All the light grey frosty bits are sandblasted. The spring and the two jaws will be just blued. They haven't been touched except on the wire wheel. Let's get cooking. I guess it's pretty obvious you're going to do this outside or in somewhere that has got a lot of fresh air coming through, because these chemicals are a little bit nasty. And what you're going to need is 1 kilo of potassium hydroxide, or caustic soda, I think it's called lye in the States, and 2 kilos of potassium nitrate, and that's the ratio you mix, 1 to 2. And here's my first mistake, and I should have known better. You never add caustic soda to boiling water. It gives off a violent reaction and it can really splash up badly. So I let the mixture cool down, and then I added the chemicals to the water. Unfortunately, I didn't know how much chemical it was going to take to get that boiling point up. I've got about 4.5 litres of water in there, and I've only got 3 kilos of chemicals. So I'm a little bit shy, but I progressed and it seemed to be working all right. Of course, the water's going to be boiling off while you're doing this. So as the water boils off, you need to add more, but you also need to add more chemical to keep the balance right. So I never did get it up to 135 degrees, but I can already tell that it still worked anyway. Here everything's cooled down to about 80 to 90 degrees Celsius. So I'm pulling all the parts out because this stuff's starting to solidify already, and I'll give them a good wash and come back and check out how it went. I'll also clean up the mess. And here's the results. Now this locking latch, even though it's been sandblasted, it's still got nickel plating on it, so the bluing didn't take it all. The rest of the parts that were sandblasted still have a frosty finish, but they've definitely got some bluing going on there. Tells me if you want your parts to be shiny blue, then you're going to need to buff them first. But that was okay, that's all part of the experiment. Here's the bolt and my homemade locking nut, and I'm quite happy with that finish. I quite like it. On those parts, here's the spring. You can see it's completely re-blued, and as for the jaws, I think they've come out really well. That was bright metal before it went into the bluing, and I really like that finish they've got on them now. Very happy with that. To me, these jaws look as good as new. They're not buffed or anything, that's just straight out of the bluing and washed in clean water. So this is another pair of cable cutters I fixed up a few months ago. Did them the same way on the surface grinder, but I cold blued them. And I'm not a big fan of cold bluing. I don't think it's as good. And this bluing in hot salts is definitely a better finish. Might be hard to see on camera, but there's a sheen the hot salts give you that the cold bluing doesn't. So I'll be sticking with the hot bluing, I think. Now, searching on the internet, I found that these cable cutters are actually made in Germany. There is a name on one of the jaws, but otherwise there's just a sticky label that obviously comes off over time. So I've decided to do something about that and put the name on them properly. Here's my pair all finished. I've powder coated the nickel plating in bright orange, and I've put their name on them properly, so there's no mixing up next time where they're made. Let's test them. I guess that doesn't really count. How about we get a bit more serious and try something a bit more fair income? How about some heavy duty battery cable? I've got to tell you, that was absolutely no effort at all. Let's try it again. Just a note, this style of cable cutter is designed to cut copper and aluminium cable only. If you try and cut steel cable or hard wire like bicycle spokes, you will damage the jaws. Bit harder this time. Not sure what's going on here, but these are putting up a bit of a fight. Notice the colour of the cable. Let's try these one more time. Oh, they're locked. It was really easy again. But I think I know what's happened. This piece of cable's full of solder, so I've cut through the soldered copper cable. Now, how did I get that name written on there like that? Well, I'm glad you asked. I recently went out and purchased an old gravograph machine. These are what the commercial engravers used to use before they got all their modern CNC stuff. Of course, it needed some work, so I stripped it down completely, went over the whole thing and powder coated it all. But I'll have a separate video about this later. I think it's worthy of a video of its own. A little while ago I brought home a box of tools from a local auction, and in the bottom of the box I can see them with these 3 old tyre levers. Initially I was just going to throw them in the scrap box, use the tempered steel out of them, but then one of them turned out to have a pattern on it, and it got me quite interested. So I cleaned it up to have a bit of a look. This is what I first noticed. Then when you flip it over, it says high power number 275 USA tyre tool. Well, that certainly got me interested. That whirring sound in the background is coming from that blue box with the silver handle just to the left. That's my homemade parts washer doing its thing. If you're interested in seeing more about that, just let me know. This is another piece in the bottom of the box. Looks like a crossbow, but it's quite small and very stiff. Bit of pitting in it, so I don't know if it's any good, but crossbow's no good to me, so I'll just throw this in the scrap box as well. So I'll get on with cleaning up this high power tyre lever. It's got a few bends and kinks in it. All three of these tyre levers have been used as chisels at one stage. But I'll get it straightened out, cleaned up, and give it a polish, see how it comes out. It's getting there. So it's over the belt sander, and all I'm doing here is just cleaning up the edges. I'll clean up the faces in the Sandblaster. Using the Sandblaster with the twin compressors is working really well for me. This is in real time, and look at the way it cuts through that grime and rust on the steel here. I'm really happy with it. Also, I'm standing right next to the compressors here, and I can still clearly hear the sandblasting over the sound of the compressors. They're very quiet. So here it is, fresh out of the Sandblaster. It's left quite an even finish on it. So from here it was over to the nylon wheels that you've seen before, and then onto the buffer. I didn't go mad, as I want to actually use this, keep it and use it. So here it is finished. It's had a quick buff. Originally this is what I was first going to use my bluing on, my hot salts bluing. One, I didn't have a container big enough, and two, I just liked it really. I like shiny things, and I thought it would be a shame to blue it. But I think in the future I'll have a crack, because if I don't like the bluing, I can buff it off again. It's not a problem. But seeing as how my wire cutters came out so good, and I'm now a YouTube expert at hot salts bluing, it's time to have a crack at something else. This shifter, adjustable wrench, I picked up out at my favourite junk shop for $1. And I thought, well, this will be the perfect candidate. It's looking pretty ratty. And these plates are for my gravograph. The only thing that it didn't come with was the clamps to hold down the letters. So I decided to make a couple. So the next job before bluing was to sandblast everything. That's my silver soldering. I think I'm getting the hang of it. There's no spill whatsoever. Everything's come out a nice grey, and I'll finish off by polishing the outer edges, and then we'll get on to the bluing. Here I'm just reheating the original pot. When it goes cold, the whole lot sets into a slushy block, and you just reheat it, all dissolves, it goes back into a liquid. And I'm transferring it into a bigger container here, and I think this is where my problems start. I'll show you what I mean shortly. "5 minutes in, and I'm pulling the pin out to have a look at it. This is after just 5 minutes, and it seems to be starting to take quite well. This time I got my temperature up to 135 degrees, and I actually left everything in the solution for an hour, and this is the results. That's the pin, not crash hot. And it's about now I should turn the camera off and go no further. I don't know what's happened here, but there's been a massive failure. Look at this. This is after an hour in the bluing solution. Hasn't touched it. Left a little stain. That was it. I didn't expect too much on the plates, because the plates are stainless steel, but those nuts are mild steel. They should have gone black. So the only difference I can see is that I used a mild steel pot, not stainless steel. So when I get a bigger stainless steel pot, we'll have another crack at it. This is just a quick look at the clamps I made for the gravograph. I think they came out well. Now a question for you guys, please. When I restored my Atlas Arbour press, I bodged up this magnetic badge because I didn't have the real thing. But finally, after 18 months of watching, I picked one up from eBay USA, It's a beautiful badge, but my question is, should I clean up the paint and get rid of the scratches, or just leave it as is and fit it as is? Look, he even sent me the little rivets to hold it in place. So that's my question. Clean it up or leave it as it is and just fit it? So that's it. Thanks for watching me mucking about again. I appreciate any comments you bother to leave. Cheers. Even my assistant editor Lucy gets sick of all my talking and falls asleep on me. Can't blame her.